My name is Miles Berry. My day job these days is working at the University of Roehampton, training the next generation of outstanding teachers, which is a lovely job to do. I'm in charge of the ICT subject area there. I've been doing this for 2.5 years now. Before that, I was a primary school head teacher. Before that, I was a deputy head and ICT coordinator. Before that, I was an ICT coordinator. I've been doing this for far too long, hence all the grey hairs. No, the grey hairs actually were just those 3 years as a head teacher. Which is a very stressy thing to do. Any head teachers in the room? Okay, well done, kudos, respect. The rest of you, be nice to your head teachers. They deserve people being nice to them. So that's where we're heading this afternoon. I've got far too much content, but as a former head teacher, nobody back when I was back in that role was allowed to say, Miles, you've said too much, stop. So I've sort of abused the privilege still. Want to start by talking about a few bits about pedagogy and why this matters when it comes to ICT, remind you of things from your teacher training days. Then we'll segue into the sort of curriculum loop over on the right-hand side there. This is particularly current, particularly interesting, particularly important when it comes to ICT. And then if we've got time left, I'll do a few sort of more modern bits of how we go about teaching ICT. So that's where we're heading. This is where I work now. Actually, that's the Vice-Chancellor's office. My office is not quite so splendid as that. Roehampton, like Oxford and Cambridge, is a collegiate university. We have 4 colleges that make it up, and the one which I'm tied to is Froebel College. Anybody know anything about Friedrich Froebel? Oh, he's one of the great unsung, well, possibly unsung, heroes of education. He invented the kindergarten, and we have a picture there, German painting of a kindergarten, probably not very late, much later after Froebel invented one of these things. So do you reckon they passed their EYFS inspection? Ofsted came in. I'm not sure how much attention the grown-ups there are paying to the children, but does that matter? Children do seem to be learning something, or at least engaged in activity, don't they? And I think part of Froebel's philosophy of early education is place children in this rich, vibrant, lovely environment, the garden, the place to play, the place to explore, and allow education to happen to them rather than necessarily worrying too much about what we teach. The other thing Froebel's known for is coming up with the Froebel Gifts, which are the presents, which are lovely sort of things which you give to a child over their first 3 years of life. So this is one of them, the Froebel blocks. And various people sort of passed through Froebel kindergartens, including Frank Lloyd Wright. I think, those who know Frank Lloyd Wright's work will see some connection between his early childhood experiences and what he went on to build. So bear that in mind, folks. I'm not saying you're teaching the next Frank Lloyd Wright, but who knows? You may be teaching the next Bill Gates. You may be teaching the next Larry Page, Sergey Brin, the next Mark Zuckerberg. The ICT education opportunities that you put in the way of the children you teach can make a huge difference to all of our futures. People worry a little about the P word here, the pedagogy bit. And I think that's because we have the wrong understanding of what pedagogy is or what a pedagogue is. If you go back to the Latin roots, Greek roots, I had a comprehensive education, Secretary of State would be appalled, wouldn't he? You have this notion of the pedagogue is not so much the teacher as the slave in the household who takes the child to the place where education happens. I think that's the sense in which I'm thinking about pedagogy, in which I'd encourage you to think about pedagogy. I know it feels as though we're slaves at times, but more think in terms of you're the people who take the children to the place where learning takes place. There are concerns about pedagogy when it comes to ICT. Ofsted reporting last December, look at some of the words there. The greater pedagogical skills and understanding of many of the teachers of other subjects observed in the survey, an excess focus on Key Stage 4 ICT lessons on particular requirements of the exam accreditation. So perhaps pedagogy when it comes to ICT is too assessment driven, perhaps particularly in secondary school. Perhaps we have things to learn from our colleagues who are working in different phases or different subjects about how to do this teaching thing better. I think a few words from our Secretary of State.
Still, in many it's very changed over the century, even since Plato established the earliest academia in a shady olive grove in ancient Athens. If you took a Victorian school teacher into a 21st century classroom, in many schools in the country, he or she would feel completely at home. Whiteboards may have eliminated chalk dust, Chairs may have migrated from rows to groups, but a teacher still stands in front of the class, talking, testing, questioning. But we all in this room know that model won't be the same in 20 years' time. It may well be extinct in 10.
There's a point which others have made, that by and large what happens in our classrooms is not that different from what happened in our teachers' classrooms or in their teachers' classrooms. Gove says here, this is going to be so different because of technology in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time. Could you put your hand up, please, if you think it will be radically different in 20 years' time? That's really surprising. So why not? We have Moore's law, we have this inexorable pressure of technological change. How come school then, in your view, won't be different in 10, 20? Okay. If you're still expecting people to work individually in hand and write things out by hand, controlled conditions, then access to all of the world's knowledge, being able to communicate with your personal learning network probably won't have much in exams. Discourage that. Other reasons for not change? And since Plato's day, schools, to a greater or lesser extent, have done that reasonably well. Other reasons for not changing?
You take stream. You could, in theory, have all. There is a massive society in child mind.
Yes.
They always need to be kept in
It
building.
keeps them busy.
And that's why I think ultimately there will always be schools. If you've got children there, you have to have.
When I first got let out of school to come and do this sort of thing, back 2005, 2006, still very much teaching. And so we'd record the introduction to the lesson. And of course, the children would do their work online. And so Lucy Hawkins said, look, Mr. Berry, if you don't have to be here to do the teaching, and we don't have to be here to do the learning bit, what is the point? Which is a really interesting conversation. And they said, actually, there would be a point, because we'd miss our friends. I think a big part of what school does is let us, teachers, we learn how to get on well with other people who we wouldn't necessarily have much in common. It's well worth bearing that in mind, that this is, part and parcel of what school does well for us. Okay, quick refresher from your teacher training days, folks. Can anybody name all three of the gentlemen on the board behind me? 2 out of 3. Oh, your PGCE tutors would be so disappointed. Okay, let's do it one at a time. Anybody do this chap? B.F. Skinner, the great sort of theorist of behaviorism, yes, comes back to you now. Yes, great way of teaching puppies, great way of teaching pigeons, possibly a good way of teaching some children some things. We'll discuss that in a moment. Gentleman in the middle, this should be an easy one. Piaget is the beret, isn't it, that does it? Very good. And we have this theory of constructivism, that education is about making our understanding, our meaning of the world around us. And finally, the scary gentleman on the right here. Vygotsky, absolutely, okay. Social constructivism, that it's not simply through exploration and experiment, it's also through conversation, through discussing things with one another. And I think perhaps that's going to be a part and parcel of what school does. Oh, this is old school. This is early 60s does YouTube work. This is Skinner's teaching machines. I'm struggling to show you the video of this.
These young people are studying in a new way. Class in spelling, it might as well be arithmetic or algebra or grammar, or in fact anything involving the use of words or symbols. Each student is using a teaching machine, a device which creates vastly improved conditions for effective study. What are teaching machines? How are they used? What can they teach? Who prepares the material they teach? And how does this material differ from textbooks, lectures, and educational television? What impact will machine teaching have on school organization? Some of these questions can be answered in at least a preliminary way.
I'll come back. Well, the Skinner teaching machine is an amazing device. It's entirely mechanical in operation. It shows the children a question, and they write in the answer, crank the handle round. If they've got the answer right, well, it tells them what the answer was, so they immediately know whether they got it right or wrong. Is anybody thinking here, yeah, we do this stuff online now, this is how so much online learning seems to be built around that sort of, what is it, stimulus, response, reward. I'm going to ask you 10 multiplication questions. If you get them right, well done, you get a biscuit and 10 more multiplication questions. If you get them wrong, you just get 10 more multiplication questions. We're still doing this with so much e-learning, and I think there's so much more potential there than that. So we say to our students, or I say to my students, I reckon there are these 3 ways to learn when it comes to lots of ICT stuff. Learning new things on a computer. There is the learning through play, very much in the Piagetian mould of let's explore, let's experiment, let's discover, let me just play with this, please. There are those who like to have the instruction manual, the worksheet, the YouTube walkthrough, the resource to work from. And there are those who like to have somebody to sit alongside, somebody to support, somebody to talk to about it, very much in that sort of Vygotskian mode. Could I ask you, please, not to answer correctly, which is it depends, but to pick one of the 3 and say, okay, when I come to learning something new with technology or on learning about a computer, I tend to favour one of these 3. Could you put your hand up, please, if your preferred learning style is the play, the experience, the explore? Whoa! I wish I had one of those clicker things. Okay, what about those who like to have the manual, please? Thank you very much. Those who like to have somebody there to help them, not necessarily the tech support helpline, but other things too. That's really interesting. Very different, well, far more dramatic a set of results than I tend to get with my students, interestingly. Okay, if that's your learning style, is it not likely that that's the learning style of many of your pupils too, when it comes to ICT stuff? Plausible? So, does that determine the way you go and teach your ICT lessons? Does that determine the way ICT happens in your school? If that's how we learn and how we think many of them learn when it comes to ICT, do we feel we're providing enough opportunities for play, for experiment, for exploration? I'll pause briefly if anybody wants to respond or question.
Isn't it down to the times? I mean, I spend hours.
Because of the inexorable pressure. That's a shame, though, isn't it? Which do you think is more effective? But not necessarily more efficient. Yeah. Down in the primary phase, we get to carry on playing for a bit. We don't have to worry so much. I don't think about exams. So, no? Not in your school, not in my school. Has gone, or we don't.
Obviously, I've brought that back in here. A lot of my year 2s, particularly in ICT, wanted to be told exactly how to do something, and I would say, right, I'm playing with this program, I want you to go and play, and for the first 10 minutes, and then within 10 minutes, try to press this button, see what happens.
Because
and you listen to
it.
the excitement, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I suppose in year 3, I've got a.
But is this not something which we can stamp our feet and say no for this? If not necessarily for other things, we have this new freedom. Come September, assuming the consultation goes through on the nod, Secretary of State doesn't have a program. He doesn't have an attainment pricing. What a wonderful opportunity to return to these things which seem to work for us. The same is true after the key station. It's not just the primary thing scheme of work or the programs. Yeah.
A lot of our staff, the staff bit, they want to teach them how
Why is that? Yeah. I mean, your friend there makes a valid case about efficiency, that if I've got to get them to this stage by this date, then the low-risk strategy is for me to just tell them all to get on and practice. Without, screensaver settings set too low, or I'm talking too much, one of the two. Okay. There is perhaps the freedom which we get lets us say, okay, let's do less better, rather than just trying to cover territory. But yeah, the staff confidence thing of being willing to become the guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage is, I think, going to be the issue for some. But my guess is, test it with your colleagues. Ask them the same question. When they learned how to use their phone or learned how to do things on Facebook, how did they find the training course for that? Was that useful for them? Or did they just figure it out for themselves? Yes, yeah. But, third picture here, we learn from other people. We really do. Okay, right, onwards. So yeah, these are the figures when I asked my new first-year students. Surprisingly more balanced than you were in response to this. And of course, we have one or two always say, well, it depends, which is, of course, a perfectly sensible answer. But that's got to skew the way we do things in our lectures, and I hope it is starting to do that. We also asked them the skills questions. Which of these things can you do well? And, these are folks many of our new undergraduates straight out of secondary school. What are the things which they're good at? Pretty much what you'd expect them to be good at. Down the bottom of the list here, apparently 28% of them are expert when it comes to Facebook, which is a relief. Taking digital photographs, managing documents, files, folders. Yeah, that's what they say on the audit. You just wait till the hand-in deadlines. Sorry, I forget this is being recorded. Create presentations, sequences of slides. They're good at PowerPoint. We don't need to teach them how to do PowerPoint yet again. Stuff at the top of the table is more interesting. Really surprising stuff. Working with video up there, 20% of them saying they've got no knowledge of working with video, no skills when it comes to working with video, and relatively low numbers claiming any degree of expertise or proficiency. We've had video editing software in school, surely. Secondary school teachers in the room, put your hand up. Keep your hand up if you teach video editing. Okay, that's most of you, isn't it? Yeah? Let's do the same for primary. Primary school teachers, hands up. Keep your hand up if you do video editing at some point. Brilliant! How come so many of my first years say that we've never done video editing? Seems such a shame. Well, obviously, they're sort of south rather than north. Smart notebook or interactive whiteboards, 25% of them no skills, very, very few of them claiming any degree of proficiency expertise. They've seen this software being used every day, pretty much, for the last 7-8 years. It must have been that they've been at school, and yet they claim that there's not something they can do. Does that mean, I wonder, I asked them, that they've not been allowed to use the boards? The board has just been a tool for the teacher. When it's come to making presentations, they've not been allowed to use Smart Notebook or Active Inspired? Well, by and large, yes. It's seen as our tool, not their tools, which is a surprise. And of course, the big one in terms of current news issues, the programming stuff, 2/3 of them saying we have no skills when it comes to writing scripts, writing macros. We've not done any programming. It's been on the national curriculum for many of their entire school careers. It's only 14 years ago some of these students entered school. And by that point, we had writing sequences of instructions there on the primary curriculum. How come it is so honoured in the breach rather than the observance? Which takes me on to curriculum matters. Oh yeah, we also asked them about understanding and knowledge. And this is the really stark contrast. The skills is, it's fine actually. There's a lot of stuff that they can do. When it comes to knowledge, not nearly so many scoring high marks or giving themselves high marks. When it comes to understanding, I think this is appalling, really. What is this figure here? This is sort of 2/3 of them regard themselves as competent, proficient, or expert in terms of skills, but less than a quarter as competent or proficient when it comes to understanding of computers. I asked them what's the difference between the web and the internet, and nobody's ever told them. Isn't that surprising? Isn't that ever so slightly troubling? That we focus so much on the skills that we've not given so many of my students this sort of understanding of how technology works. Am I right to be worried? Are there people in the room who say, Miles, you should be much more sanguine? They can do all of this cool stuff. Are there others who share my worries? Yeah. That keeping the skills up to date is hard. If you've got the underlying understanding, you've got that mental schema into which the new skills can fit. Other views? Okay. Very, very quickly. Think about the people you're teaching. Think about your learners. Think about the time you have with them. Could you, with the person sitting next to you, write down the 3 things you'd most like them to have by the time they move on to their next school, wherever? Oh, yeah! How are you going to teach them enthusiasm?
Yeah.
You've got 3 things. So good. That's just got it right, isn't it? Okay, I'd love to hear all of these, but we really don't have time for that. Who's got one which they think, yeah, I want to say this one out loud, this is a really good one. Something they'd like their learners to move on with? Willingness to try things out, confidence to have a go. Very nice, like that. Love of learning, that's so good. And wasn't it a disappointment with that National Curriculum Review that love of learning featured so little to my mind? What else have we got? Yes! Failing better. They get this so much through playing the computer games. We really do. But so much of playing on is about failing and providing the opportunity for children to struggle. Know that. Okay, who else has got one? Oh, I like that. I like that very much. How do you teach for that? Very good. The answer, does anybody put down grade A start to C? Level 5 in stats. Interesting. Interesting. Okay? If what you've got are like what other people have said already, then that surely has to determine what you, how you teach. If what you've written down is A star to C and you just put your hand up, that's fine. You know, we respect that. The Secretary of State, I'm sure, respects that. But that also will determine what you teach, how you teach. If you're wanting qualities like confidence and independence, gentlemen had enthusiasm, yeah? Then that's got to colour both curriculum and pedagogy, to my mind. Which takes me on to some of the curriculum stuff. This is the wordle from What is the Purpose of Education? This was Purpose Ed on Twitter, on the web, and you put all of these tweets together about what people think is the purpose of education, and these are the sorts of words that come up there. It's pretty cool, isn't it? Does everybody have a vision for what they see as the aim of education, purpose of education? Anybody want to share those? Big question. Is it a bad world? Oh no! Okay, preparing children for the world. Anybody else got one?
Independent.
Thank you. Yeah, free thinking, independent, liking it.
Create autonomy.
He's used the A word, autonomy, very, very close to my own heart when it comes to this. You know, my own answer to the question goes back to R.S. Peters, great philosopher of education, who said the aim of education is about rational autonomy, is producing people who will think for themselves, who won't just go with whatever the latest fashion is, who will think things out. R.S. Peters, our concept of an educated person is someone who's capable of delighting in a variety of pursuits and projects for their own sake, whose pursuit of them, general conduct of life, transformed by some degree of all-round understanding and sensitivity. It works for me. You have your own, and hold that in mind as you're thinking about curriculum. I want to just nod in the direction of curriculum. The word means a race. The word does mean the course that's set out there. So there is this sense of a program of working through things in the word as it stands. Of course, we can interpret that in more than one way. This is mentioned right at the start of the day. This is the expert panel's review of the national curriculum and setting agenda for where we go next. They say hurtful things like this. Despite their importance in balanced educational provision, we're not entirely persuaded by claims that information and communication technology have sufficient disciplinary coherence to be stated as discrete and separate national curriculum subjects. That bothered me ever so slightly when I read it, and thus they propose for 2014 onwards that ICT becomes part of the basic curriculum rather than the national curriculum. It's something which all schools are required to teach, but the specification of that becomes something which is left to each school to decide. Do you feel you have a feel for what ICT is as a subject? Do you feel it does have that coherence to it that they couldn't see? If you had to define the subject, what would you come up with? This was my attempt at a definition. Taking the three letters, information, communication, and technology, creation of management access to data in its digital forms, covering communication is about both networks and working with other people, and the technology is about understanding how all of this works, which I think matters. They also say that programs of study should have at their foundation a set of aims for what you're wanting to achieve. So you've got your overarching aims for education. What then are your overarching aims for ICT education? And mine are, I think, minus to basically those three. About confident, safe, independent users of technology. This is very much the digital literacy bit. The knowledge and understanding needed to apply technological solutions purposefully, creatively, solving problems for other people, which I'd see very much in that sort of IT area. And then this knowledge and understanding of how the hardware, how the software, how the networks work, how they get made, which I label as technology, but see that as the computing bit. So that's my attempt at what my aims are. Have your own, please. What we have then is something which is akin to waterfall design. If we come up with a set of requirements, we then think about a curriculum that we can do that with, we then implement that, and sometimes we test whether it's working or not, and then we keep the thing ticking over. And that's what we've been doing since 1999 for the primary phase, since a little more recently for secondary, because you had a new curriculum there. But very much a sort of waterfall-led process. This changes very, very soon. Assuming the consultation goes through on the nod, assuming Parliament don't object, we get, from September 2014, a blank piece of paper, no programme of study for ICT, the chance to choose whatever we want with this. We still have to teach ICT, but within that requirement, everything else is up to us. You can still carry on doing this. The national curriculum doesn't disappear for ICT, but it simply ceases to be required. That's the four areas that we have. Anybody in the primary phase remember the Rose Review? Yeah? Fondly? ICT as an essential for learning and life at the core of the curriculum. The stuff that they wrote is still there. There is nothing to stop you from September 14 dusting it off if you didn't post it back to them and saying, yeah, actually, we think that's a really good way of structuring an ICT curriculum. Lots in common with the existing national curriculum for ICT, but, you can use that, certainly for primary. Secondary, you can still use what you're using at the moment. That doesn't cease to be a problem. Others take a different view. The Royal Society sees ICT as really very problematic and that it's a damaged brand. I think probably because they've focused too much on GCSE specifications and, giving people a qualification for the sort of thing which is on many GCSE specifications. But without seeing the broader picture of what happens Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3. They come up with this tremendously helpful diagram. I don't know, that's, again, teensy bit hurtful, I found. But they see replacing ICT with those three strands that I hinted at earlier, of the essential digital literacy stuff, of proper computer science, and also of an area which they're labelling as information technology, the thing which is about the people rather than about the machines, I suppose. Other people working on this computing at schools, I should declare an interest. I'm part of the management board for computing at schools, who say, okay, let's just look at that computer science bit and come up with a curriculum for that, and see it in those 5 areas. This is downloadable off the internet: algorithms, programs, data, computers, networks. The rest of it, they're not going to specify. That's up to others to engage in that. Sorry. So we move then from that sort of waterfall approach to a much more iterative development cycle of, let's try this out, let's plan this, let's see what we actually need, but let's test this and change it year on year. This becomes something which is easy for us to do because we no longer have a statutory programme of study, if all goes through. NACE are taking this approach, again declaring an interest as currently chair of NACE. We've worked on our Key Stage 3 specification or curriculum for ICT, and we're looking at doing Key Stage 1 and 2 to sit underneath that. Again, taking quite a different line, but very much based on an iterative annual cycle of review. The vision is to say that you've got 3 dimensions, but 3 quite different dimensions. A digital life, digital tools, and also the techie stuff about digital technologies there. Okay, I think some overlap, but when you get into the detail, probably quite different. And other groups of folk. I can't believe there's only 2 or 3 of us on Twitter. Is that really the case? Get yourself on Twitter, folks. There's such a wonderful, vibrant network, and people are so generous sharing what they've found, what they've discovered. It really is very much worth your doing. So Rethinking ICT started as a hashtag on Twitter of folks just saying, what do we want to do in our schools with our classes? And let's start talking about this there. And Brian Sharland's digital studies thing, really innovative approach to sort of Key Stage, top end of Key Stage 2, lower end of Key Stage 3, very much focused on the building web-based tools, with the notion of assessment done as hack days at the end of Key Stage 2, end of Key Stage 3. So they, to assess this stuff, you spend a day working together, solving a problem, making a project about this. The sort of thing Young Rewired State are doing at a national level, doing that as your process for assessment in school. Some really exciting stuff happening because we have this YouTube video clip, maybe, open source approach to a curriculum. Goes round and round and round. At which point oh, here it comes.
Also be considered not just about the ICT curriculum, but about the broader school curriculum in a new way. Because in an open source, why should we accept that the curriculum will always be one single static document? Why should it be a statement of priorities frozen in time? A blunt instrument which lands with a dump on teachers' desks and which is updated only by one central bureaucracy and only infrequently. Because we know that in ICT, schools can already lead the way when it comes to using educational technology and new and exciting ways. And they do it despite what government prescribes, not because of it. So I believe that the essential requirements of our broader national curriculum, while they do need to be specified in law, can be interpreted more flexibly, and we can use technology creatively to help us develop the content of what is actually taught. So beyond a new slimmed-down national curriculum concentrating on the essentials, we need to consider how we can take a more wiki collaborative approach to developing new curriculum materials across the board, using technological platforms to their full advantage, and creating something richer and more sophisticated than anything that's previously been available to schools. Now, my proposal to supply the ICT programme of study is about embracing the potential of that freedom. It'll mean that for the first time, teachers will be allowed to cover truly innovative, specialist and challenging topics. And whether they choose someone else's curriculum, or whether they design their own programme of study specifically for their school, they'll have the freedom and flexibility to decide what is best for their own pupils with their own abilities and their own background. Teachers will now be allowed to focus more sharply on the subjects that they think matter. For example, they could teach exactly how computers work, they can study the basics of programming and coding, and they can ensure that pupils have a go themselves.
Interesting. Okay. Up to you now. One of the metaphors that's used in open source software is this notion of the cathedral versus the bazaar. And what we've had so far is very much a cathedral-like approach to curriculum design of, a master architect plans and designs this. It's meant to be, the perfect space, rather than something which is closer to, we all contribute something of our own to this. And let's work together. Let's bring our area of expertise, what we're enthusiastic about, and put those together into a space which we've all got access to, and see which bits will work for our learners. So moving from one size fits all, this is as good as it can be, to let's figure it out and take bits and add things and change things. And so we move on from that sort of iterative spiral of curriculum development to something which is a lot more agile, of saying, yeah, these sorts of things, follow your plan, documenting everything, thinking about the processes is really good. But actually, when it comes to agile software development, and perhaps to agile curriculum design, responding to change, working with our customers, I think we mean pupils, I think we mean students here, concentrating on getting something which works, and thinking about the individuals and thinking about the interactions is far more exciting, interesting, the way to do things. Other things about open source, you have these freedoms that let's try and do this stuff without charging people for it. Let's make this open to everybody. Let's expose the planning process and let people see how we've put this together. Let's share this with others more widely, and let's feel free to tweak things and to improve things and to make things better as we go along. I suspect we are kind of running out of time, so what do I need to show you before we stop? What's good? Yeah, the personalization stuff. Anybody remember Plowden? One or two in the room, okay? What's the Plowden quote? At the heart of the educational process lies the child. That we now, for ICT, can do this. It will, from September, be perfectly legal for you to go into an ICT lesson and say, okay, guys, what would you like me to teach you? Or what would you like to learn today? I don't think that was an intended consequence. I don't think that's what the Secretary of State wanted to happen. But an agile approach to curriculum development says, okay, perhaps we should, once in a while, put the child at the centre of our curriculum and say, okay, this is what you can do. Let me help you move on to something else. Okay, that's high-risk strategy and difficult for us to do as teachers, but not, I hope, out of the question. Other things to show you, Siemens and Downes, connectivism, a learning theory for the digital age. As knowledge continues to grow and evolve, access to what's needed is more important than what the learner currently possesses. It's the learning to learn thing again. It's the love of learning thing again. That giving children the skills to figure it out for themselves and to know what to do when they meet the challenge, when they fail, is so much at the heart of how we should be preparing children for this future, which we cannot really see or imagine now. I've run out of time, I really have. And so much more I wanted to tell you. I'll put a few bullet points on the slide. I'll put my contact details up. But have I got time to take any questions? Okay. Anybody, any questions, comments? Miles, that was just daft. Go and find out what the children want. Yeah. Okay, let's deal with both of those separately. Okay. When it comes to the school and targets, I think there's a place for ICT teachers to go to their head teachers and say, look, we have opportunity now. There is no program study. There is no attainment target. Why don't we just experiment with ICT and do things differently with ICT lessons? So many of our pupils, apparently, according to the Royal Society, etc., get bored by lessons doing the same thing over and over again. Let's do things differently. Let's try this approach or try that approach. Talk about, the ideas which have excited you to your head. It becomes a subject where, because of the disadvantage, we have that, and I hope that see that the potential to try things. Do they have teachers in the room? Possible? Yeah. There is, in the speech, he holds out hope that it can come up with a rigorous, serious computer science specification. And I think a lot of the examples are doing that. Computer science can go and sit alongside the other science as part of either, not so much pricing. It's going to be down to local negotiation. There is still a statutory requirement to be taught. It's not being removed, but making it actually simply something that really does prepare our learners for the next education. Taking making a really positive society is, I hope, an argument. The Secretary of State spins it quite differently. He's not saying because this is so unimportant, no longer matters. He's saying because this changes. Yeah, would rather not comment on which they found that. To deal with the Ofsted will still expect Ofsted will expect success. They can no longer say it has to be this way. They can no longer say it has to be assessed this way. What it comes back to is the sort of thing that Ofsted would look for in academies and independent schools and free schools, where the national system doesn't. Is it a broad, balanced, suitably challenging education? Still, broad and balanced education surely has some aspect. Children about technology. Other questions or comments? I'm going to be around. I'll put my contact details up on the slide. I'm talking to some people about Scratch or BYOB in secondary education in a little while's time. This one in the middle is where I am on Twitter. So if you've heard enough from David and me about how wonderful Twitter is, sign up and follow both of us. It's a good place to keep in touch and share ideas. Okay.